So good morning. My name is Steve Ray. I'm the Executive Director with Step Change in Safety. I'd like to welcome you to our second in the series of our TOFs video panellist sessions. And today's topic is going to be discussing mental health. And I'd like to introduce you to our panellists who have kindly given their time to join us today.
Good morning. I'm Louise Jenkins-Lang. I'm the director, one of the directors at Lindsay and Lang. 25 years in industry, and our consultancy works around wellbeing and mental health across various sectors.
Good morning. I'm Gordon Craig. I'm the oil and gas chaplain. I chaplain obviously for the industry, and I travel offshore on a regular basis 2 or 3 times a month, and I manage to speak with the crews up in offshore and get the chance to talk to them and chat to them about issues.
Good morning. So my name's Carolyn Taylor. I've also been working in the industry 25 years, 23 of those years offshore. So I work in occupational health. A great, huge part of that just now is mental health, looking at resilience, managing change, running workshops, and I also am a therapist, a CBT therapist.
And I'm Alison Porter. I'm the HR Director at Bilfinger, and we're trying our very best to raise awareness of mental health within our organisation.
Thank you for introducing yourselves. Let's start with a question that is very generic but applicable to us all. So wellbeing at work and mental health are very prominent issues right now. Alison, what brought Bilfinger to the place where they are now with regards to their programme for mental health and wellbeing?
So it was the mental health statistics that made us do something. You know, I'm sure you've all heard 1 in 4 people in the UK will have a mental health problem in a given year, and it's 1 in 3 in Scotland. And the suicide rate is, well, suicide is the biggest killer in males under the age of 45. With our workforce offshore, we have over 2,000 employees who are male. So these statistics is worrying for us. So, you know, we ask our employees to tell us when they have hurt themselves physically. So why would we not want to do something with regards to their mental health? So that's why.
Great, thank you. So Alison touched on something that I believe is part of our challenge in this industry, is around the stigma attached to being open about potentially your well-being and mental health issues. From an offshore visit point of view, Gordon, how ready are people to talk to you when you're offshore?
It's interesting. I think over the last few months there's been an increased awareness of this whole issue, and some companies are running programmes to educate and encourage their workforce to talk about such issues, and I've seen that reflected in my visits. I've been on to platforms where all of a sudden people have approached me and started talking openly about issues whereby in the past it may have taken a good few hours and a little bit of building of a relationship before we reached that stage. And they were beginning to use terms which I kind of thought, oh, wait a minute, that's a proper kind of almost psychiatric term you're using here. Where did this come from? And it's come from companies actually going to the workforce and beginning this whole process of encouraging people to talk. So on some platforms I've visited, I've seen that very starkly, and I welcome it. On other places, people are less keen to talk, shall we say, and find it quite difficult. So it does make a difference when companies put in these programmes.
Thank you. Following on from that, Carolyn, you kind of let us know that you've been working in the offshore space for quite a number of years, and Gordon talked about a journey. Have you seen that journey evolve or change in the near term or the short term?
Very much so, yeah. I was definitely a tick in the box when I was going offshore 23 years ago. Now I don't feel I am. The interesting thing is that when I go, I visit platforms more than once, and very often what will happen is exactly what Gordon says, is that actually when I arrive on the platform, they say, oh, can I book in for a one-to-one? You know, so that's something that's really quite new. Very encouraging, and I think the biggest thing of all is if the senior management team buy into it, then there is much more of a rollout wherever you are, onshore or offshore. You know, it's like you're saying with the company, if you have a company where they see their leadership team walking the walk as well as talking the talk, then they're much more willing to open up and talk about things.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So, and Louise, if we think about your organisation, and you mentioned you take a much more rounded and holistic approach to that, how widespread is your engagement with the oil and gas community, or are you still at sort of fledgling level?
So we work across various sectors, but from my background, I've been supporting people with mental health challenges, offshore, onshore in the oil and gas industry. So what we see is that it's very much changed. People are willing to talk a bit more. There's a bit more openness. There's a bit more acknowledgement that maybe some of the things that are occurring in them are maybe things associated with stress or anxiety. And we talk to quite a number of people across operations managers, OAMs, who are seeing things like this, and they're definitely much more keen to talk about these things and help and support their workers. So I definitely see a shift in the support that's being offered offshore. I think it's growing and getting better.
It's good that you mentioned you work across different sectors, and I think as part of step change in safety, and actually as an industry, we always talk about learning lessons and learning from other sectors on the safety side. Is there an opportunity for us to learn from other sectors around the mental health and wellbeing space? And I guess that's a question I'll put to you first, Alison, because you work in various different sectors as well as just oil and gas, right?
Yes, absolutely. I would say so. We have partnered up with a charity to help us with our mental health programme, and it's Mates in Mind, and they work in construction. So I actually very much believe that it doesn't matter what industry you're in, it's still the same material that you need, the same training, it can be shared from one industry to another. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pick up on that, Louise? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've worked across food and drink, oil and gas and construction. Mates in Mind we are familiar with as well. And the issues are not dissimilar across industry, different industries. So there's certainly learnings there. In construction, the suicide rate is higher. You're twice as likely in construction to die from suicide than you are from a fall from height. So there's definitely lessons to be learned from cross-industry integration and learning different things. But the challenges that each industry faces is not dissimilar. Even in the food and drink operations, we've seen it's not different. So lots of learnings.
Interesting. So what, if any, it makes, because we work in a remote environment offshore, which only I would imagine exacerbates the issue because you're away from your support mechanisms. If you work on shore, you go home at night and potentially you've got something to share with. Would you say that's the case, that because it's a remote work site, that people feel more isolated and unable to have that support around them?
I think there's two sides to that coin, Steve. Yes, it's remote, you're away from your family, loved ones, so that puts pressure on you. But conversely, you could be in a supportive community because the offshore community is known to be supportive. I think, however, there is a danger in that too, in that certainly in my experience, when I walk into a tea shack, 9 times out of 10 people are all just on their phones and they're not communicating and supporting with one another. And there's a marked difference between tea shacks which have Wi-Fi access and tea shacks which don't have Wi-Fi access, which mean the guys have got to go upstairs if they want to communicate on social media. And the ones that don't have access, they're talking again. Now, in that kind of environment, you could argue it's a supportive environment. We all know what it's like. The banter flows, there's jokes being told, and there's a kind of blokey support thing going on there. But so in that case, yeah, positive. But yes, you're away from those who you probably care about most. So it depends, I think. You know.
What's your view on that, Carolyn?
Yes, I would agree with that. It's two sides. When you're offshore, there is that camaraderie, there is that bit that is supportive, but there's also the fact that you're away from your families. Social media is not always a good thing. Please don't think I'm advocating that they stop Wi-Fi. I'm not advocating that. But social media for some people can be very distressing. There's also the issues like lack of privacy offshore, travel to and from the rigs, all these things that are very much a part of the stressors for the people who work offshore. And so that is something that obviously there's not a lot we can do about that. So it's really looking at how we manage that, how we help people recognise when they're sharing cabins, how to be with your cabin mate, you know, to give them some space, some time. And I think what we were talking earlier on about was with the mental health champions, looking at maybe people who are in that role, recognising, you know, when they can have these conversations would be good.
So let's drill down a bit into the actual communities we have offshore, because I think it may be different for different communities. We have a massive amount of transient workers offshore, in particular Bilfinger would probably have a huge influx of people for shutdowns and TARS and so on, Alison. Those are people who don't have typically the camaraderie they might have on a core crew. How do we have to approach that differently from an industry for the transient workforce? Because you have people who live their day in all their working lives, and you have those who come in for 6 weeks and then they're somewhere else. How do you maintain a support mechanism for transient workers in a dynamic environment?
We haven't done something differently for them. What we've put in place is offshore champions, some mental health champions, and we haven't distinguished if they're for transient workforce or not. We want to make sure that everyone's got the opportunity to speak to somebody.
I mean, I would add to that, because when I'm offshore, obviously I'm speaking to the core crew, but I'm speaking to everybody and never differentiate between who's on there. And very often people will come and say, can I come to this presentation because I'm not core crew? And I would say, well, of course you can. And so there's that support that is, you know, the companies who take me offshore are very willing for me to do that. And then you're looking at how you help them with support, ongoing support, and when they get back on the beach, maybe through their company who has a support mechanism, or through other areas.
It's that community which is the most vulnerable offshore by far, because they don't have the offshore relationships that the rest have built up on. And they do have added, I've seen them express the view that you have added stress, and that they finish one contract, when's the next one coming? Are they going to have money coming in? So there's all that going on in their lives too. So I think they are the most vulnerable part of their community.
So again, I'm just using what I believe is my experience. If I worked offshore and I saw yourself, Gordon, coming out, I would see you as a safe space to talk to. Yeah,
I'd like to think you would, but it's down to relationships. But yes, that's what I'm there for. I'm there for people to talk to. I'm also recently I'm also been asked to talk about mental health issues with those who are in a supervisory chain, maybe doing some listening skills, talking about depression, how to spot it, how to support somebody with it, because they can't cure it, but they can perhaps do something. And that certainly includes that group of people who are transient, and hopefully flag things up and push it back to the beach appropriately.
And as you may know, Step Change and Safety is running mental health champion courses throughout this year. And one of the questions I was asked was, you're creating mental health champions. What support mechanism is there in place for those that may become affected by some of the information they receive from someone who is looking for help? Is that something, as an external organisation, you're supporting?
Yeah, certainly. It comes up in all organisations that we talk to where they introduce champions or first aiders, is that there has to be something in place to support those who may be having conversations around information that they maybe didn't expect to hear. So how do you support them afterwards? And all businesses have things like employee assistance programs. They also often have access to individuals like Carolyn who do CBT through their occupational health providers. So there's certainly a foundation for support for those individuals should they feel they need it. But also the other thing that we find is them having the opportunity to go and speak to their leader or their supervisor, and it's bringing that leadership and supervisor awareness up of what mental health is and what it means in the workplace as well. And once you've got that, it seems to be a much more supportive culture for your champions or your first aiders.
Yeah. Good. Alison, we talked earlier regarding who becomes your mental health champions.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that if you don't mind.
Okay, so our mental health champions are all volunteers. So last year when we as a company decided we really need to raise awareness, we, as I said earlier, we partnered with Mates of Mind, which is a UK charity working in construction, but you can share it with any industry. So we went out to our workforce, said this is what we're wanting to do, but we want volunteers who who wishes to be a mental health champion, and we were inundated. It's fantastic. We've got over 80, and it's very much half and half for onshore and half for offshore. And then we put them through the champion training, which is done by the British Safety Council, but it's all volunteers. And what's amazing is they've all got a story. You know, they're all touched by something with mental health, if it's a loved one or if it's a friend, or they all have a story to tell. And that's why they want to be a volunteer. They want to continue to raise awareness.
Which
Carolyn?
sometimes then is really effective for reducing the stigma, because what people are saying is these are genuine workforce people who have survived this. You know, so it's not the end of the line. That's the big thing, I think, because there's such a fear of, if I admit to this, then I'm weak, I'm useless, I'm not as good as everybody else. But what they're hearing is, I've got this story and I'm not weak. You know, it's actually made me stronger sometimes, or at least I can talk about it, and so I can see a way through it. Because the biggest point of this is they have to see a light at the end of the tunnel.
It's very powerful when your own employees are your ambassadors, and others can see that even though they may suffer from a mental health condition, they're thriving in the workplace. Because we all know that even if you have a mental health condition, you can be very effective in the workplace. So it's really powerful. It's a nice platform to give people, isn't it?
There's a lot of discussion around, and a lot of disparity, if you like, for various reasons around rotation, working cycles and all that in the offshore. In your experience, I guess for you all, how big a part does that play in creating a holistic effect on well-being and mental health? Because people are maybe away for shorter times, but then longer times at home, because it works both ways, right? If you're used to being in a structure where you have your support mechanism available to you every so often, and all of a sudden you're longer at home, how does it manifest differently when you're at home?
I can speak from an offshore wife's perspective,
Yeah.
and also someone that suffers from anxiety, PTSD. So how it manifests in an offshore wife's capacity is very much that everything happens when your partner's offshore. You know, the leaks happen, the fridges break, something goes wrong with the child. So it's offshore rotas can be often quite challenging. For us, the 2-3 rota was very good. 3-3 was very tough, particularly if he was working night shift and was coming off of night shift, coming home. That turnaround was very, very difficult. So that whole impact of well-being on him and the family was quite significant. So rotas is what it is. I think that we're 3 and 3's here to stay, but I think that it definitely does impact well-being.
Definitely.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that a lot, offshore and onshore. The guys, well, the biggest issue they want to bend my ear about usually is the 3-week rota if they're on 3 weeks. And but some of the things you raised too, Caroline, that privacy in the having 3 weeks of no privacy, having 3 weeks of just being in the same place, as you said, everything going wrong when they're offshore.
Yes.
And speaking to the wives too, it's the same sort of thing. They're saying their partner's coming back and they're walking on eggshells as things gently get into place, and then the few days before they go, everything goes to pot and they're arguing and the stress levels built up. So of course that has created that kind of stress. It's definitely there, and don't think it should be ignored.
I work with a community of offshore wives with children specifically, and the biggest challenge that they face is the connecting with their person offshore. And a lot of the children find it very difficult with the absent parent, and then the connection offshore. There's some businesses that do it brilliantly, and internet and Wi-Fi is readily available, and then there's others that you'll try and FaceTime with daddy and it drops out. It's all these little things that add to well-being and then contribute to stress and continue on to perhaps something bigger.
It's something they always mention. You know, obviously the rota is a big thing just now, but they always mention not just themselves and the fatigue and the doing 3 weeks offshore, it's also how they reconnect with the family. They're tired, they go home. How do they actually manage that? Where is their place in the family? Which is something that we've both seen in the military as well, you know, where when they're away for a long period of time, when you come back, there has to be an allowance from both parties to give that person their place, if you like, back in the family, because it can be a real deal breaker for a lot of relationships where you have that time away.
I think too, what I've heard offshore about this too is that there's a lot of talk about how you cope, blah, blah, blah. But when you talk to guys individually, you get a slightly different story. Sometimes it's not so much what it's doing to them individually, it's what it's doing to those they care about at home. And it creates this sense of guilt because it's causing that pressure at home. And they can cope with it in one level, but it's actually causing a lot of anxiety as to what's happening at home. I used to look after my mother who's got Alzheimer's, I've got children, I've got grandchildren, all that kind of stuff comes out.
I know some of our employees last year when we had one of our workshops, some of the examples was there may be something happening at home with a family member and then they have to go offshore. So they're leaving their loved ones at home to deal with the situation because they've had to go offshore. So yeah, it does very much impact them.
Yeah. And it causes stress through the guilt of it all.
It does, yes.
Alison, you've trained quite a number of people now as champions in your organisation. Have you seen signs of them becoming like a self-fulfilling organisation? They communicate across those that are trained, or do you still see them as pockets of people who go and work in different sites, or are they actually creating almost like a champions community as part of this?
Well, we do have a committee. We have created a committee out of it for our onshore personnel. We've still got a long way to go. We very much have a long way to go. The offshore piece, we've just started the training, so we'll see what happens this year when they actually go offshore and start the conversation workshops, obviously liaising with our clients to ensure that we can do this offshore. But no, we've got a long way to go.
Okay, and for you folks who run clinics or go offshore and run one-to-ones and all the rest of it, do you get the feeling that the more you do, the more people that want to see you? You know, is it like something that's growing its own sort of network? People are becoming more comfortable in talking around it, the stigma barriers dropping, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I certainly see that. The more we do, the more we're asked, particularly around the offshore supervisors and leaders, just wanting more information on how they can actually support their teams. So as well as that peer-to-peer and colleague support, they're really keen to know what they can do as leaders to support their people as well and do the right thing mainly for them.
On that, we also have been doing manage the conversation, so just very much on that point. So we have start the conversation, so just about starting raising awareness about mental health, but then we have manage the conversation, and it's for anyone. It doesn't need to be managers or supervisors, it can be anyone who's, who works with colleagues, their team members. How do they actually deal with that conversation? The day when they're at the coffee station, they say, oh, good morning, how are you? And that individual doesn't actually just say fine, they actually say, I'm not fine. How do they actually manage that conversation? So that's really, really important.
It is, and we do a lot of training in that area, and that's quite powerful because what we get is, well, I don't know how to have the conversation. It's opening a can of worms. How will they respond? And then at the end, they're very much a case of, it's not that difficult. It's actually just a conversation. Yeah. So it's great to hear that you're doing that. It's really great.
So as an industry, what are the enablers we need to make this become more prevalent from a support point of view?
The ongoing support, I would say. So the companies can do so much in recognising, starting the conversation and understanding how to have that conversation, but there has to be that bit afterwards, the support. Where do they go with that? And once we've highlighted it, once we've raised the issues, where do they go when they're back onshore again? Or for the onshore workers, where do they go? Not all companies have employee assistance programs. So that side of it can be quite awkward. I find that whether I'm onshore or offshore running workshops, if the specific one I did yesterday where it was only the employees who were allowed to use the employee assistance program. And yet I had contractors in at that as well. And so it's like spending a bit of time saying, this is where you can go. And I think maybe a little bit more around the inclusiveness of employee assistance programs from the larger companies, I think would be a good start.
But also, in addition to employee assistance programs, there's other helplines out there,
course,
Samaritans, occupational health. There's lots of support out there.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so you're right. There's lots of other support mechanisms that are not necessarily industry specific or employer led. How would individuals or companies connect to those organisations to gain access to assistance and support? Is that readily known, or is it something there's a mystique around that?
There is a bit of mystique about it.
I think unless you need it,
Yes.
you probably don't know about it. So there perhaps is some.
Is there an education piece there?
Yes.
Absolutely.
We could do as an industry about what is out there and what's not.
And that forms definitely part of, I'm assuming, the champion training, but certainly in the first aider training, that signposting or directing to different agencies and different places does occur in that training. So yeah, there's lots of information, isn't there?
We couldn't do what we're doing on our own. We had to go and partner with, as I say, the charity that we partnered with last year, and they're giving us the materials and the guidance and the training that we need. So yeah, absolutely. And maybe more education about what is out there.
Because that's the crucial point in it all. It's no good encouraging people to talk about their issues if you have to take them and further afield, and there's nowhere to signpost them or nowhere they can take them to, and it's the crux of the matter. You know, we don't want people to talk just for the sake of it. We want people to talk and be open about it, to try and support them or find support for them. And if that support's not there, there's no point talking in a sense.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm hearing is that with the support organisations that are available in the wider area, in the wider market, we don't have to necessarily be overly concerned about being branded or badged for specific companies. We're typically really bad at that as an industry. We want it to be in our brand and our colour. But I guess what I'm hearing is it's available at a generic level. Why not tap into it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's shows the need for collaboration in this space, because there's so many opportunities to tap into different areas. I think it would be a great opportunity to collaborate.
If we don't, to pick up on Gordon's point, I think if we don't do that, we're leaving people quite vulnerable, because we're asking them to open up, and then we're basically saying, oh, don't know what you do now. You know, so it really has to be the full package.
Good. So, you know, we talk a lot again about safety competence and operational competence offshore. Is there something in our process systems of work we should be looking at, going, okay, so if this is really one of the biggest conditions affecting us as an industry, should we be addressing it more proactively from a, I don't know if it's a competency and training point of view, but how do we measure what we're doing, or should we be measuring what we're doing to connect with the workforce around well-being and mental health? Because right now we know our pipe fitters and our welders are coded and so on and so forth. What do we know about our champions? Is it in a portfolio, or is it just because it's voluntary, it's voluntary?
I'm not aware of any organisation that's got it in a competency framework at the moment.
I don't know that.
Or is that too structured? Do you think that's too structured for it?
I'm not even convinced that would work, actually.
Yeah.
Because you've got to have so much confidentiality around.
Agreed.
You know what you're talking about. And so, I mean, a part of the beauty of something like an employee assistance programme is that it is confidential, and the company don't know they're using it. The downside of that is the company don't know who's suffering.
Yeah, so how do you monitor? Because without monitoring, how do you
quite difficult,
how do you derive improvement in it?
Yes.
Yeah, and as it stands today, because it's not legislated to report on mental health cases, the statistics are, well, variable. You can, I think they're underreported personally, but
I think they are, actually, because you get still people who, and you still have GPs who buy into that, you know, well, you don't want to put stress on your sick line, so I'll put infected big toe or something, you know, so it's something that's not really, I mean, even a bad back could be related to stress, but it's not necessarily caught in the statistics.
Yes,
so I think it's very
invisible.
Underreported. Yeah.
Interesting. So for hopefully many people offshore will dial in to watch this video, and if you could give them one piece of advice if they think they need support or help, what would that be? What's the first steps for individuals who may think, wow, they're talking about what I'm suffering from, and they're pointing me in a direction? What would that direction be?
So for us, it's speak to somebody, if that's a colleague offshore, or if it's somebody at home, speak to somebody. If you're not comfortable about doing that, then it's actually, we reach out, go to the employee assistance programme, go use any of the helplines that we're trying our best to keep advertising to you all, but just speak to somebody. I suppose that's my main thing, speak to somebody.
I would definitely say the same. Just start the conversation, speak to somebody you trust, go and speak to them and say, I want to speak further about this. I mean, even if it is the employee assistance programme, they can phone it from offshore. You know, so it's not that they're stuck with nothing offshore, and there are other sites that they can use, different, Mind is very good, Samaritans is good, you know, all the different, some well known, some not so well known, but the biggest message is don't let it fester.
Yeah, we're on a theme, aren't we? speak to somebody about it. The way our brains are wired up when we're under stress or feeling emotional, our rational side of our brain shuts down and it's all emotion. And sometimes you need to borrow somebody else's rational brain to guide you through and point you in the right direction. So speak to somebody you trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Echo that. It's all about having the conversation and speaking to someone that you trust.
Thank you. So as we wind up, we've used our time very effectively, and it's amazing how quickly it passes. Is there any one message you'd like to give to the audience that's potentially watching this around well-being and mental health that we could close out on? Louise?
So for me, it's about not being afraid. Just if you are experiencing stress or a mental health condition, it doesn't define you, and don't be afraid to speak up.
Thank you. Gordon?
I think you may be concerned that you have a mental health issue, but you can work through it and there'll be somebody there that can support you and you'll come out of it.
I would say what I do quite often is I turn this completely on its head and say it is not a weakness to talk about it, it's a huge strength to talk about it. It takes a very huge amount of strength to actually say, I don't think I'm coping. So I would say, turn it on its head and look at it that way, that this is a strength to say this. Don't bury your head in the sand.
Alison?
For me, it would be, just help us raise awareness. When you're speaking to your colleagues, take that little bit longer. When you're at the coffee station, when you're saying, how's your day? And they say, fine. Are you actually listening to them? And let's just try and get rid of the stigma that still surrounds mental health.
Well, thank you all for participating in our panel event today and sharing your insight and your experience with us. Thank you very much. And for those folks who are dialing in or watching this offshore or at home, we thank you for being interested enough to visit our site. We look forward to your feedback. Things get better and improve with feedback. We would encourage you to give us it. And please look out for our next TOF session, which will be in around a month's time on lifting. Thank you very much.